Once upon a time, there was a magnificent and peaceful kingdom where a beautiful queen was loved by everyone for her gentleness, kindness, and grace. The people adored her deeply, for she was not only beautiful on the outside, but also pure and noble at heart. The king loved her so much that he would have gladly given away all the treasures of the world just to see her smile. Beth had other plans. One day, the queen fell gravely ill. Darkness filled the palace. Sadness spread through the air, and sorrow shadowed every face. The king summoned every healer, every sage, and every physician, but no cure could be found. When the queen realized that her time was near, she held the king's hand in hers and with tears in her eyes said, "Disregator, king, when I am gone, promise me that you will marry again, only if you find someone like me. A woman whose hair shines golden like mine, whose beauty glows like mine, and whose heart is as gentle as mine." The king's heart shattered, but he made the promise. The queen smiled softly, closed her eyes, and fell into an eternal sleep. The whole kingdom mourned her loss. Months passed, but the sadness in the king's eyes never faded. He isolated himself and let no one come close. Time went on. The seasons changed, but the season of the king's heart remained the same, lonely and sorrowful. "Your Majesty, the kingdom needs an heir. You must marry again." But the king had only one answer. "Until I find a woman like her, I will accept no one." Years went by, but in no land, no realm, was there found a woman whose beauty could be compared to the late queen. The king's search remained fruitless, and his heart kept breaking more and more. As time went on, many springs came and went in the kingdom, but the autumn in the king's heart never changed. The echo of his vow still lingered within the palace walls. "I will not marry anyone unless she is like her." Years later, the queen's little daughter grew into a young woman. Her golden hair shone like rays of the sun, and her smile carried the same tenderness that once lit the late queen's face. The palace servants would often whisper, "She is the living image of her mother." One day, the king saw his daughter in the palace garden. As the sunlight touched her face, his heart began to race. For a moment, he felt as if his late queen had returned. The emptiness, the loneliness, the sorrow inside him, all suddenly filled with a strange and powerful feeling. But that feeling slowly turned into something dark and dangerous. The king's heart and mind were overtaken by madness. He began to repeat again and again, "My queen made me promise that I would only marry someone like her, and now she stands before me." These news spread throughout the court. Shock and fear swept over the faces of ministers, advisors, and the people alike. No one could believe that the king had become so blinded by his promise. When the princess heard the news, the ground seemed to slip from beneath her feet. She said to her father, "Father, I am your daughter, the memory of your late queen, your honor. How could I ever become your wife?" Pol would not listen. It was as if his senses had abandoned him. His obsession had dragged him into the dark madness of a promise he no longer understood. Tears filled the princess's eyes, but courage filled her heart. She decided that the only way to save both her father's honor and her own life was to leave the palace forever. Was filled with fear and sorrow. She knew that if she refused directly, the king's anger might fall upon her. So she decided to use her wisdom, to find a way out that seemed impossible, yet clever. One evening, during the royal court, the princess came before the king. Her face appeared calm, but her heart trembled within. Gently, she said, "Father, if you truly wish to marry me, then first you must fulfill a few of my wishes. Only then will I even consider your proposal." The court fell silent. The king took a deep breath and said, "Tell me, my daughter, what are your wishes?" Relinquished princess replied with steady grace, "My first wish is that a gown be made for me, one that shines like the light of the sun, so bright that it dazzles the eyes of whoever looks at it. My second gown should be as pure and radiant as the moon, so that it seems as though the moonlight itself has descended upon the earth. And the third gown should glitter like the stars, each thread sparkling as if the entire Milky Way were woven upon it." The courtiers exchanged astonished glances. No one had ever heard of such requests. But the princess wasn't finished. She spoke her final condition. "And at last, I want a cloak made from the skins of every kind of animal. Soft fox fur, gleaming deer hide, thick bear pelt, and the spotted skin of a leopard." The entire court stood speechless. They knew such a task was nearly impossible. But the king, blinded by obsession, immediately declared, "All of the princess's wishes shall be fulfilled, even if the treasury is emptied and every forest in the kingdom must be searched." Fear and sorrow still filled the princess's heart. But now a small spark of hope flickered within her. She thought, "Perhaps he will never be able to do all this, and I will have a chance to escape." But fate had something else in store. Everyone in the royal court thought her wishes were nothing but madness. Who could possibly create such extraordinary garments? One dress that shimmered like the sun, another that glowed like the moon, and a third that sparkled like the stars in the night sky. And then, a cloak made from the skins of dozens of animals. It seemed like a task fit not for a human, but for a magician. But the king's reason had been clouded by his obsession. He was determined to turn his desire into reality. Day and night, craftsmen, goldsmiths, and tailors were summoned to the palace. From across the kingdom came the finest silks, gold, silver, and gems. From the forests came the skins of animals. Weeks passed. The palace echoed with the sound of hammers, looms, and tools. Each day, the princess prayed that perhaps the king's madness would fade. But one day, an announcement was made in the royal court. "The princess's 3 gowns and the wondrous cloak have been completed." When the princess saw them, her heart trembled. They truly looked otherworldly. One golden, gleaming like sunlight itself. One silver white, shining like the glow of the moon. And one glittering with the light of countless stars. And the cloak, soft and heavy, made of many furs, radiated a strange, magical aura, both beautiful and haunting. Tears welled in the princess's eyes. Kissing, now she was certain. If she stayed another day, her fate would be sealed forever. That very night, while the palace slept, dismissing, and the moon hid behind the clouds, Sentencing quietly closed her chamber door. She smeared soot over her face so no one could recognize her, and wrapped herself in the cloak of many skins. She tied up her 3 magical dresses, a small golden ring, a tiny spinning wheel, and a spool of thread. She looked one last time at the palace, where once her laughter echoed, where her mother's footsteps lingered, and whispered softly, "Farewell, my childhood home. Farewell, the land of my mother's memories." Then she vanished into the darkness of the night. The shadows of trees surrounded her. The wind tugged at her cloak, and the dry leaves rustled beneath her feet. Thus the princess took her first step into a new life, Mildments and the strange games of destiny. The princess had vanished into the darkness of the night. The air was cold, and the shadows of the trees stretched long and frightening around her. She was hungry and thirsty, yet she dared not stop. Every moment after escaping the palace was filled with fear. Fear that a soldier might recognize her, or a wild beast might attack. Days turned into nights, and nights faded into days. Sometimes she slept beneath the roots of trees. Sometimes she covered herself with leaves to keep warm. Sexism, who once slept on silk sheets, immersion lay on the bare earth, her tears wetting her face. But within her heart burned one unshakable resolve. She would not lose her honor or her freedom. That thought alone gave her the strength to keep going. At last one morning, as the sun peeked through the trees, she saw a beautiful kingdom ahead. Tall towers, marble walls, golden flags, flourishing. It felt as though she had stepped into a dream. She tightened the cloak of many skins around her, tightening and slowly approached the palace gates. Suddenly, a group of hunters appeared. When they saw her, they froze in shock. Before them stood a strange figure, neither fully human nor beast. Her body covered in mismatched furs, her face smeared with soot. One hunter whispered, "What creature is this? Human or some spirit of the woods?" Another murmured, "Perhaps she's a shadow of a forest witch." The princess trembled but spoke softly, with humility. "I am no witch, nor beast. Sentenced a helpless traveler seeking shelter. All I need is a place to breathe, a place where no one knows me, where I can live in peace." The hunters exchanged puzzled looks, then decided to bring her before their king. When the king saw her, he too was struck by her strange appearance. Yet, there was something in her eyes, something innocent, something filled with sorrow, that touched his heart. He said gently, "Let her stay. Give her work in the palace kitchen." And so, the princess, once seated on a royal throne, now lived beneath the palace stairs in a small, dark room. They gave her a new name, the Girl of Many Skins, for no one knew who she really was. From dawn till dusk, she scrubbed dishes, sentencing ashes, and survived on leftover scraps. But every night, when the palace fell silent, she would whisper to her heart, "One day will come, when the truth will be revealed. Sentencing and the world will know who I truly am." One day, the palace was filled with celebration. Lights sparkled everywhere, and the air was sweet with perfume. The king had announced a grand banquet, an evening for nobles, lords, and the most honored families of the realm. The palace walls gleamed like gold, Sentencing shimmered with jewels, and servants rushed about in excitement. The princess watched from afar, her heart stirring. A quiet wish rose within her. If only I could see this splendor up close. If only, just once more, I could wear the gown that shines like the sun. She remembered the days when, in her father's palace, she had owned those priceless dresses. And now, the same girl sat covered in soot, hidden away in the darkness of a kitchen. Suddenly, the cook's rough voice echoed. "Hey, you there, the girl with many skins. You'll go near the hall tonight. The guests need attending." A small spark of hope lit inside her heart. When everyone left the kitchen, she quickly washed her face. Missiles wet away the soot, and took out her sun-golden gown. Trespass, the one whose glow could light up an entire room. As she put it on, it was as if a ray of sunlight had descended to the earth. She looked in the mirror, and there she was again. The same face, the same grace, sentencing that had always light, that had always lived within her. With gentle steps, she walked toward the grand hall.
The palace doors opened wide, and the moment she entered, every eye turned toward her. Her gown gleamed as though woven with light itself, its fragrance mingling with the music and laughter. And for one breathtaking moment, the entire room fell silent. One day, the palace was alive with celebration. Lights shimmered everywhere, and the air was filled with fragrance. The king had announced a grand feast where nobles, lords, and the most honored families of the land would gather. The walls of the palace gleamed like gold. Turbulence sparkled across the carpets. Sentencing hard wood hurried back and forth. Who now lived in the palace kitchen, watched it all from afar. A longing stirred in her heart. If only I could witness this splendor. Sentencing. I could read that radiant gown once more, the one that shone like the sun. She remembered the days when she lived in her father's palace, owner of such royal garments, and now that same girl sat covered in ashes, blinds in the darkness of a kitchen. Suddenly, the cook's voice echoed. "Hey, you, the one with all the furs. You'll go near the hall today. There's work to do for the guests." A spark of hope lit up her heart. When everyone left the kitchen, sentencing, she quickly washed her face, wiped away the soot, and took out that golden gown, so bright it could light up the entire room. As she put it on, it was as if a ray of sunlight had descended to the earth. She looked into the mirror. The same face, the same beauty, the same grace once hidden within her, now alive again. With gentle steps, she walked toward the hall. The palace doors opened, and as soon as she entered, every eye turned toward her. Her gown shimmered with fragrance and light. Silk and gold seemed to dance around her favor. For a moment, the whole hall fell silent. No one understood. Who was she? Where had she come from? The king, seated near his throne, restrictions his feet. His gaze drifted into a dream. He stepped forward and spoke softly. "My lady, never in my life have I seen such beauty. May I have the honor of a dance?" The princess lowered her eyes, missiles her heart pounding wildly. For a moment, she forgot who she was or where she had come from. Music began to play, and they started to dance. Under the palace lights, her golden gown shimmered, and everyone felt as though they were part of a living fairy tale. The king smiled. Fists, but curiosity kept growing within him. Who was this girl? Was she real? Or a vision from a dream? Kneel the dance ended. The princess bowed gracefully and quickly stepped back. Everyone was stunned, the king most of all, and he commanded his servants to find her. But when they reached the palace gates, she was gone. That night, crimson of the quiet of the palace kitchen, the girl with many furs sat silently, holding a golden ring in her hands. Then, smiling softly, Shimmer dropped the ring into the soup she had made for the king. As soon as the dance ended, the princess bowed before the king, but the nervousness on her face was clear. She knew that if she stayed any longer, her true identity might be revealed. So the moment the music stopped, she hurried out of the hall. Gathering the folds of her long golden gown in her hands, she ran swiftly through the back corridors of the palace and disappeared into the darkness of the kitchen. There, she quickly smeared soot on her face again and wrapped herself in the same rough cloak made of animal hides, the one that hid who she truly was. The shining gown now lay concealed beneath it, and once again she looked like an ordinary, shabby kitchen maid. That night, a special meal was being prepared for the king. The princess saw her chance. She carefully made a bowl of soup for him, a soup so fragrant that its aroma filled the entire palace. Then, from her pocket, she took out a small, delicate golden ring, the same ring that was a keepsake from her past, a gift once given to her by her mother. Sentencing Ate gazed at it lovingly and gently dropped it into the bowl of soup. When the servant brought the soup before the king, he took a spoonful, and suddenly, along with it, came a small golden ring, looked at it closely, and fell silent, dismissing stutter deep within his heart. This ring, it couldn't belong to just anyone. Such fine craftsmanship, such delicate gold. It could only belong to someone of noble blood. The image of the mysterious girl began to fill his mind. The one he had danced with, Smith, her golden gown, her soft smile. Smith. As if she was still standing before him. The king turned to the servant and asked softly, "Who made this soup?" The servant replied, "Your Majesty, it was that same girl, the one who works in the kitchen, the one everyone calls the girl with many hides." A ledge of astonishment spread across the king's face. He fell into deep thought. Could it be possible, he wondered? Could that plain little kitchen girl actually be the same radiant maiden presumption with whom I danced that night? That night, the king stayed awake for a long time, stiffness turning the golden ring over and over in his hands. Outside the palace, a gentle breeze whispered through the night. And somewhere, behind the kitchen door, the princess sat quietly, smiling, for in her heart, a spark of hope had begun to bloom. The second royal feast was even more magnificent than the first. Sentencing over the palace glittered with light. In the silvery moonlit night, chandeliers shimmered above, casting their glow upon the marble floor,
as though 1,000 stars had descended to the earth. This time, the princess wore a gown of silver, smith, so radiant that it seemed the moon itself had come down to rest upon her shoulders. When she entered the grand hall, every gaze turned toward her in an instant. The king approached and said softly, "Last time you vanished so suddenly. This time, I will not let you leave." Temptation smiled and lowered her head. Music filled the air once again. Tingham and together, they began to dance. For the king, time itself seemed to stop. He was lost, as if nothing else existed but her eyes, her grace, her presence. But as the final note faded, Sentencing suddenly turned and fled toward the great doors. The king called after her, "Wait! Who are you?" But she was gone, once more hidden beneath her cloak of furs, her face darkened with soot. As the king's meal was being prepared, Thirst the princess quietly made the soup again. Yet this time, her heart was softer, warmer. From her bundle, she took out a tiny golden spindle, the very one she had once used to spin silk beside her mother as a child. Sentenced at it tenderly, then slipped it gently into the bowl of soup, and found the little golden spindle inside. Smith, his heart began to race. His doubts turned into certainty. "This is her," he whispered. "The same girl. The one who has captured my heart. I will find her, impartial if I must search every shadow of this palace." And in a quiet corner of the dark kitchen, the princess sat lost in memories of that spindle, unaware that destiny, Sentence, was already guiding her toward the king's heart. The third banquet was the grandest night of the entire year. Sentenced over the palace gleamed with lanterns, and it seemed as though the heavens themselves had descended to earth. In the king's heart burned only one desire: that perhaps, tonight, the mysterious maiden would appear again. This time, the princess wore a gown that shimmered like the stars. Every fold, every sparkle, held the glint of a galaxy. When she entered the great hall, sentencing as if everyone had stepped into a dream, the king's gaze found her instantly and did not waver. Music swelled once more. Missions, and together they began to dance again. The air in the hall seemed enchanted. Starlight mingled with the rhythm of their hearts. During the dance, the king gently took her hand and, in secret, slipped a golden ring onto her finger. Sentenced startled, but said nothing. Her heartbeat quickened. She felt that her secret might not stay hidden much longer. As the music ended, Sheep turned swiftly and fled toward the door. But this time, fate was not on her side. Sentencing she couldn't finish smearing soot on her face, and hastily pulling on her cloak of hides, she ran back toward the kitchen. The next morning, when it was time to serve the king's soup, Simmons she quietly brought the tray as usual. But the king's eyes suddenly caught sight of her fair, delicate hand. He froze. "That's the same finger, the one I placed the ring on last night." The king gently took her hand and with a swift motion pulled away her cloak of hides. The entire palace gasped.
Before them stood the same radiant princess, bathed in the light of the moon, the sun, and the stars. Tears filled her eyes as she told the truth about her father's vow, her long escape, and the strange twist of destiny that had brought her here. The king listened quietly, then took her hand and said softly, "You never need to hide again. This palace and this heart are yours." And so their wedding was celebrated with great joy and splendor. They lived happily ever after. It is said that on that night, the strings in the sky shone a little brighter, perhaps because they too knew, at last, a princess had found her story. Thor.